And so welcome to this International Ergonomics Technical Committee Visual Ergonomics first webinar. And we'll be active. We have a bunch of panelists that will be from the technical committee that will be presenting. And also just a comment for you guys that you are more than welcome to leave your questions in the Q&A part. There's a Q&A at the bottom where you can actually leave your questions. And then we'll keep track of that and I will read your questions for the panelists. And the first speaker of today will be Marino Menossi, and you're more than welcome to join us.
Thank you very much, Hillevi, for the introduction, and welcome to everybody. Thank you very much for joining this. It's actually the second webinar. The first one was not working, so thank you very much for your patience. So I am going to present my ideas about this webinar here and share the screens. That is this one here. And so I guess, yes, that's working. So the title of my contribution is about coping with presbyopia. And as you can see, I am not the youngest anymore. So I have some experience in presbyopia. And I would like to share my thoughts about this. I have worked on this field for many, many years and still working now on that field. And so I will try to link some findings of research, but also some expertise of practice to help presbyopes to cope with presbyopia. So the first slide is just the last slide. That will be here I have some problems with my mouse. I think, yes. So that's just the conclusions, a list of some tricks on how one can cope with presbyopia, or by my knowledge, what people are doing. So the first one is don't care about. There are some people who do not need to have a good vision for a close distance, and maybe they even not realized that it's not going to work for a close distance at an elderly age. So they just don't care, but that's rarely the case that this is going to work. The second point is to use lenses to compensate for the lack of accommodation. We are going to see what this means exactly. So we can, like I wear lenses in frames or other type of lenses. There are monofocal type of lenses, bifocal type of lenses, progressive lenses. And the important point in the lenses is to know how much power should we have in these lenses. There is a little debate that we should consider about half to two-thirds of the remaining accommodation amplitude. This is important for the very young presbyopes. For the elderly presbyopes, they have no accommodation amplitude anymore, therefore it's irrelevant. But for the younger, it's an important question which is relevant to ergonomics. Which is the power we need to put in the lenses? Then we can use optical instrumentation to overcome this lack of accommodation for near vision. That would be binoculars or telescopes. Loops are not recommended. Also, the loops is a very cheap instrument and is a very widely used instrument. They have optical deficits which impede to have a good vision with the loops and create a lot of headaches, also postural things and so on. Then there are more newer things is to see in monovision. This is, I would say, still experimental. Monovision is you can correct one eye for a close distance and leave the other eye, usually that's the dominant eye, for a far viewing distance. So you have both distances, far and near, included in your eyes. Some people can do it, can work with that. Some cannot. This can be done with contact lenses, one eye for far, one eye for near vision, or we can also put this power into intraocular lenses, when you are doing some surgery, for instance, cataract surgery, you need to replace your lens by an artificial one, then we can think about having the replacement in monovision, to have one eye for near and one eye for far. Or, and I guess Hillary will get on that point, we can improve settings for visual environment. Namely, we can work on lighting, which is very important for the elderly people. But more about this will be said by Hillary. So what's presbyopia now? You see here a cross-section through the eye. And what you see is on the left side, the eye cross-section. Here you have a lens, and this lens is flexible and can be vary in power, so to be adjusted for far or for near vision. The adjustment is possible because the lens is kind of flexible or soft, but with age, this lens hardens, and therefore you cannot vary the power of that lens. Now, adjusting this lens is an effort, as is shown on the bottom right graph. This is for a young person who is looking at a near point, that is the closest distance one can see. The effort is here maximal, is 100%, and as more as you increase the distance, then the effort decreases. And there is a minimum effort, which is not at infinity, that would be the far point, but somewhere in between the closest point you can see and the farthest point. Good. Now, what happens with age? This soft lens hardens, and therefore you lose the flexibility. And this is shown here by the next slide. Here you see on the left-hand side, the power the lens can be adjusted at as a function of age. We see that in a very young age, at about 10 years old, you can vary the lens in power by about 12 diopters. And this variability decreases with age. We get into a critical state at an age of about 40 years, where the variation of the power is not enough or critically low to have a good vision for close viewing distance, about between 30 and 60 centimeters. And if when age increases, then the power decreases, should be down to zero. This 1 diopter, which is still at an age of 60 years, is only due to the depth of focus of the visual system. Now, when this happens, on the right-hand side shows you how the acuity decreases for two measurements. One is for far vision, that's the upper curve, the dashed one, and the other one is for near vision, that's the dotted one. And you see that for near vision, at an age of about 40, the acuity decreases drastically and gets below about an acuity of 0.8 or 80%, which is the critical acuity required for a good vision. Now, in order to overcome the lack of flexibility of this lens, we can use external lenses, like the old ones shown on the bottom here. These were very early type of lenses used by monks to overcome their presbyopia. So we can have here two states. The presbyopic eye is focused, that's a normal eye. The presbyopic eye is focused to infinity. So for close objects, that would be here the green spot here. This object here in a presbyopic eye is not focused on the retina, is only blurred. So, but by putting then a lens in front of the eye, that would be this one here, we can achieve a focusing of that object, of the green object on the retina. So this is just a monofocal focusing lens, like the one I have here. This accounts for one close viewing distance, but sometimes you require several close viewing distance, let's say for the screen at 60 centimeters, for maybe your manuscript or your keyboard at 40 centimeters, or for an intermediate vision at maybe 1 or 2 meters. And therefore, there are other types of lenses with several segments of powers, Or what shows the next picture is we have varifocal lenses where the top of the lens power here is set for a vision to infinity, and the bottom part of the lens is set to a near viewing distance, whereas the middle part of the lens is then set for a intermediate range. The problem in this is, as is shown here on the screen, is that the errors, this is the gray shaded area, are introduced into such a type of lens and impede proper vision. You cannot see through the gray shaded parts. And this alters what is shown then on the right-hand side, then the coordination between eye and head movements. So in the upper type of lens, the eye and head movements are such as on the upper two graphs on the right-hand side. And we see that reading a text is achieved by moving the head and not by moving the eyes, like shown here on the top. So it is important to choose the right type of lens, like the one shown on the bottom, for instance, for reading at an intermediate distance, which enable a good movement of the eye, like in a natural case, and not with the head when you are reading. So that's an important problem when choosing this type of varifocal lenses. You must tell the optician what type of work you are going to do with that lens, so that the optician can choose the appropriate model to best fit your requirements. Now, the problem is with loops, as we see here. I'm sorry for all these red lines. The loops, we could use a loop for achieving near work, like shown here. But as we see on the graph, the power of the loop depends on the age of the user, because to have a good vision, a sharp vision at a near distance, you need accommodation also with the loop. And accommodation is decreasing with age. Therefore, as shown in the graph, the effective magnification is reduced with age. And if you see at an age of 50, the magnification is about 1.6, so not very much anymore. In addition, as shown on the right-hand side, there are problems in posture when using loops. The upper two sketches show you a user using a loop for near work, and the right-hand side shows you the complaints people have when using this loop for longer duration. And you see there are postural complaints as well as visual complaints, as shown on the top spot. Whereas if you use binoculars, and that would be the right replacement or the right instrument for near work when using detailed vision, when using a binocular, you can adjust the setting of the binocular so that you have no postural complaints. And as you see on the right spot, also the visual complaints disappear because the optics is much better than in a loop. Here, some other instruments for more specific works. You can even have very complicated instruments where telescopes are mounted on a frame, or you have here a combined frame with telescope and some light sources, like for instance is used for dentists. So as you see, this dentist requires a high resolution of the teeth of the patient, and can achieve this using this telescope in a natural position, natural posture. So if you are young, of course, you can then still bend forward and go close to the patient's teeth, but then you will have an increased complaints in posture. So these are some technical means. Now to more progressive means. Here, as I said, you can work in monovision, where one eye is corrected for near vision and the other eye is corrected for far vision. This can be done with contact lenses, as shown on the left-hand side. There are monofocal contact lenses, but there are also multifocal contact lenses. This is a very complex optics. These multifocal contact lenses, they project several images onto the retina. And depending on the distance of the object you want to see, one of these images is sharp and therefore has sharp edges. And this is then recognized as the good image to process by the brain. And of course, if you change the viewing distance, then other sectors of these multifocal lenses may give you the most sharp image on the retina. And so you have a given variability with multifocal lenses. We don't know exactly how this works, I must confess, but for some people it works excellent. Of course, the acuity is dropping with this. You don't have the same good acuity as with a monofocal correction, but you have then increased variability in viewing distances. You can use the system. There are also some awkward type of contact lenses, bifocal lenses, which use a bottom part for near vision and an upper part for far vision. This requires a huge contact lens to be put on the eye and to select the appropriate part by moving downwards or upwards your eye. The same system is possible to include into the eye as intraocular lenses. That's the right-hand part. So you can replace your lens with either, as shown on the bottom, with a monofocal lens or with a multifocal lens. And in addition, it is possible to replace this with so-called accommodative lenses, where these lenses are also flexible within some range and can mimic the accommodation. So if you are accommodating, provided, of course, your capsule of the lens is intact and the fibers on which the capsule is attached are intact and also the muscle is working well, then you can have a very close similar system to the accommodation with a natural lens if you replace this with accommodative lenses. But this is, of course, still experimental, I would say. I know a couple of people who have this and they are very happy, but I think sometimes you have no choice because this is implanted in your eyes, so you must be happy with what you have. That's a way of coping and not necessarily the best solution. Now, the final one is where I guess Hillary will get on. You can also work with the lighting at presbyops to install much better lighting, because we know from the lighting, this shows the left-hand graph, that with more light, you act on the pupil diameter. The pupil diameter decreases with more light. And with this, you will then have here a better depth of focus. So if you have more light, you go from the right to the left on the x-axis, so the pupil gets smaller, and therefore the depth of focus will increase. And this is, of course, beneficial for elderly people, as you see on the right-hand graph. Also for different ages, there are pupil diameters for two different lighting sources of 9 candles per square meter, or a bright one, 220 per square meters. You see that the bright one always makes a smaller pupil than the dim one, and therefore you will benefit from this depth of focus. So concluding to say, many solutions are possible to cope with presbyopia, but the solutions require some personal engagement. Yeah, it's not that you just can go to a doctor or to an optician and say, okay, I want to have a better vision. You must cooperate with them. In particular, you must tell them why you want to have a better vision for close viewing distance, and what is your job exactly, what are the viewing distance you required, and what is a requirement for having an in-focus vision. Do you want to read, or do you just want to have leisure time, a close vision or so? So it requires some engagement of the individual. And you must try out maybe different solution where it's possible. This is for sure possible for frame lenses like here, I have a monofocal frame lens, but you can try out the varifocal ones. They are a little bit more expensive than this, but it's maybe worth trying. It's also possible to try monovision with the contact lenses, but it's not possible to try monovision with the intraocular lenses. You cannot try, you just must keep it once you have it in. And last but not least, if you want to do something, then you can do, but this depends on you. So there is some self-responsibility you need to care about. That is all. Then I am open for questions.
Thank you, Marino. There were no questions. There was one question in the Q&A, but it was actually answered by your own next slide or something. So thank you so much, Marino. You can stop sharing now, and then the next speaker can go on, which is actually me. So yay. I'm going to share my slide, my presentation here. And let's see if we can get this running. Okay, so what is visual ergonomics? Visual ergonomics is usually how to design the visual environment to improve health and increase performance. And one of that part is for artificial lighting and daylight. Is that supposed to be okay? But also how you design the work task and work object. And I think we're going to hear more about how to design the computer screens and all those things later on in the session. And then it all comes down to visual ability, visual acuity, correction, and glasses that Marina was just talking about. So the visual environment, it is really important that we think about many different things in the visual environment. One of the things that is really important is the color, for example, the color of the tabletops. They should not be white, they should not be black, they should be like a softened wood color, sort of light wood or bright gray or something like that, that is a matte surface, because if they're too shiny, they'll give up reflections, and if they're too dark, it makes it harder because the contrast towards a bit of paper will be too high. It also comes down to, for example, the situation that we have here in the center of this image, that is that you can, if you sit here, and then your eyes will adapt to the lighting or the light levels that is up here in the window. And then you try to adapt to something that is so much darker. So this, and then of course you'll have to strain your eyes and more to be able to see and read. And then that will actually affect your muscles in the upper back and neck and shoulder region. So they will increase, and that can give you neck pain just because of that, this situation here. So there's a lot more eye strain, there's a lot more neck pain and shoulder pain and upper back pain in a situation like this, instead of having the window from the side. If you have the window behind the computer like this will actually give you problem. And if you have a luminaire placed behind you like this will also give reflexes in this, and as well as shadows in your work area like this. And if you have the light source in front of you, and I think all of you have this knowledge that you sit by a kitchen table, for example, and try to read a glossy magazine, and the lighting comes from ahead of you and then it goes down. So it goes from this and then goes down into whatever it is that you're reading and then into your eyes. And then you get these reflexes. It's hard for you to see, and that's just because the light comes in front of you and hits the surface at a wrong direction. And so the eye leads the body. If we cannot see clearly, we'll adopt the body posture without even thinking about it. And one of the most severe cases that I've experienced myself is actually I was at a big market where you buy flowers and plants and stuff. And it was a big glass building with 8 meters tall ceiling and was glass everywhere. And the lady that I came up to in the cashier's desk, she had this situation here. So she was actually, the only place where she could read on the screen was where she had her head covered the screen. So it was shading the screen. And after the day went by, the sun actually moved to the left. So she had to tilt more and more and more to the left. And finally, when you tilt, she couldn't move because she had another desk on the side. So she started just leaning. And when you do that a lot, you have to sort of lift one leg one foot off the ground to actually keep in balance. So when I got there, I could actually see one of her feet above the desktop. And I started laughing. I was like, this is not the best body posture. And she was like, oh, but it's okay. It's only 2 hours a day. And I was like, you've got to be kidding with me. You're standing on one leg 2 hours a day just to manage your work. And she was like, oh, yeah, but that's okay. I never thought about that before. And then I realized, oh my goodness. So what we actually do to compensate, that's a major case. But all of these tiny little ones that, oh, I have a reflex on the screen, but if I tilt 10 centimeters to the right, I don't have that. So that will lead up in us sitting in a wrong body posture. And also this situation here, of course, is a big, big thing where all the kids, this is my son 10 years ago, and he bumped his head on the table, so he's okay. But otherwise, this situation here is so, so bad for all the people that are, all the kids, sorry, all the kids and the youthsters that are trying to do whatever they do with their phones and whatever. So it is a really, really hard situation. So there's also a sensitivity to visual stimuli. So 20 to 40% of us are much more sensitive to this visual stimuli. And you'll get the headaches, you get the migraines, you get the eye strain. And also a lot of us are flicker sensitivity. I say us because I'm one of those 20 to 40% that actually are more sensitive. And I had a colleague of mine, and she came in and she said, oh, I got my favorite fabric and I put it up behind my computer screen and I love it. But I managed to get a lot of headaches after that. And I was like, okay. And I went into her office and this was what I approached. It was exactly this. And I was like, okay, that's a really harsh stimuli for the eye to process. So it actually gave her headaches. So I asked her, could we move the fabric so you can have it behind you instead of behind the computer screen? So that's what we did, and her headaches disappeared. So it is really important how we design the visual environment. We should not have any visual disturbances that are too harsh. This is really, it would have been worse, if it would have been black and white stripes, but otherwise this is really, really bad. So, what is good lighting? Most of us don't even know what good lighting actually is because there's no lack of reference. We don't have the frame of reference of what good lighting actually is. When we come to sound levels or noises, we usually know that this is good and this is bad. But if I ask you guys what is good lighting, most of us we don't really know what good lighting actually is because we never seen or even notice what good lighting is because when lighting is good, we don't notice it. But when lighting is bad, we notice it. So this is why we never really learn to question what lighting actually is. And why is it important and how does light affect us? It affects us in many different ways. I came out to this workplace and I noticed that they actually put up a cardboard in front of the luminaire itself. Then you know someone is disturbed by the glare from this luminaire. It is a very, very clear sign when you see cardboard up or you see people putting up things, taping up things to the windows and stuff, then you know there's something wrong here. So do you experience glare right now where you're sitting? And try holding up your hands like a brim of a hat. Just hold up your hands like this. And if that feels more comfortable, then you're exposed to glare. If it's not, then this is the best way to learn how to question the visual environment and the lighting. Just use your hands like a hat, like the brim of a cap, and just try to use that more in your everyday life, and then you'll get to know what is good and what is bad lighting. In most situations, you put your hands up and you're like, oh, this is much more comfortable. Yes, because you're exposed to glare. Glare is very much common in a lot of different workplaces. Wrongly placed luminaires is one of the main things, and wrong type of luminaires, especially in office landscape. So we did a glare intervention study a year ago, and it was actually a main thing. It was a newly renovated office building, so it was an office landscape where they had these LED luminaires, LED panels they're called, installed into the ceiling. That means that the brightness here is so much brighter than the ceiling. It doesn't show here on the image, but it was actually these luminaires were 80 times brighter than the ceiling itself. So this causes a lot of glare. And usually we say that about if it's more than 20 to 1, then there's a high risk for glare. And usually, sort of, I know that there are some standards that say that 10 times more, then it should not be any sort of bigger difference here than 10 to 1. So what we did was instead we installed a pendant luminaire, that is this one, with both direct downward sliding and indirect so that the ceiling would actually become brighter. So we installed this situation instead. So we went from 1 to 80 in the luminance ratio here between the ceiling and the luminaire itself to 1 to 4. And we got a significant reduction of the eye strain of the workers that were working there. And also a reduction of the musculoskeletal part and the headache and the migraines. But that was unfortunately not significant. When we measured this, it could be that it takes a longer time for this to sort of settle down, but this was it. And we also did the intervention study or measured the before and after when the day up here in the Nordic countries is really, really important that we do these intervention studies when the day is the same amount of daylit hours. So it is the same time of year. So the day and night is equally long. So we've also developed a visual ergonomics risk assessment method that we named Veram. Veram is an online method and app and consists of 4 different parts, or 2 parts mainly. So it's one subjective part where you have the questionnaire, and then there's one objective part. And in this objective part, you have 3 different parts. You have the light measurements, and then you have an assessment checklist, and then evaluation and assessment, and also a recommendation inside this. So if you want, you can read more about our method on veramlight.com. And so we've done this together with it's funded by Alpha Insurance, a Swedish insurance company, and together with different universities all throughout. So I'm at Lund University and my colleagues at the University of Gävle and then at the Royal Technical University in Stockholm. So, and I'm also going to talk a little about flicker and temporal light modulation. So what is flicker? Flicker is a modulation of the light. So, and when you can call that the light source is flickering is actually when it's visible. When you can see that a light source is flickering, then it's flickering. But the thing is that there's something that is called a non-visual flicker. So sometimes the frequency is so high that you can't really see it, but the brain registers it. And then it's called a temporal light modulation. But I prefer to call it non-visual flicker, but that is the incorrect terminology. I need to make sure about that. But if I talk about temporal light modulation, I usually lose people along the way. So therefore, I call it non-visual flicker. And in most cases, you just say flicker, even though it's visible and non-visible. So indoor exposure comes from all the fluorescent tubes, but also the new LEDs. So this is really, really important. So there's no standards, international standards whatsoever regarding the frequency of the LEDs. So I'm going to come down to this. So here we actually can see the old type of incandescent and halogen light sources. They went from what we had in the socket in the wall. So in Europe, we have 50 AC current. That gives you 100 hertz frequency. But in this case, it was actually a burning thread, which means that the cooling off wasn't, so they had the input and then were turned off and then it cooled down and turned off and cooled down like that. So it was just like 5 to 30% something. And the old type of fluorescents, they had like about 50% because of the fluorescence powder that didn't glow as long as the incandescent and halogen. And then you came down to fluorescent high frequency ballasts. So instead of having these conventional old type of ballasts that just went on what you had in the AC current in the wall, this was sort of different because then you had a driver that gave it like 30,000 hertz. So it never had any flicker or any frequency whatsoever. Well, it did have a frequency, but we did not see that because we weren't affected by it. And the problem now with LED is that we don't really know about the LEDs and how we can use this. So in this case, we do have a modulation from the LEDs, which could be up to 50%. It could be a square wave curve. And I actually have a small light source here that I'm going to show you, because you can have, if you take a picture of a flickering LED, you can actually see these stripes. And when you see the black stripes, then it's worse. Then it's this type of curve that actually will affect us. So now we know that it can cause migraine. We just did a big study in an fMRI scanner. We know that it can give headaches, migraines, eye strains such as photophobia, stress, changes in the brain activity, harder for individuals with dyslexia to read, affects reading speed and reading comprehension. There's a lot of things here that can happen. And that was it for me. So thank you.
Thank
I'm
you
stop
very
sharing
much.
my slide.
Thank you very much, Hillevi. There is one question here in the chat from Randy Moore, and the question is, do you remember the actual luminance levels of the LED panels in the study, and have you published the data from the study and where?
Thank you, Randy. The actual luminances, they were like, I think it was like 30 to 50 in the ceiling, and then 80 times higher. So it wasn't that high. The luminance wasn't that high. So 30 to 50 in the ceiling, and then times 50. And I am writing the paper as we speak. So hopefully within the spring, we'll have the results out.
Then
Thank you,
maybe
Randy.
another question from myself. I mean, there are standards about flicker on cathode ray tubes. These were the old glass monitors we had before. Is this not applicable to the LEDs?
The old type of, for the computer screens, they were like 85 hertz. But 85 hertz is actually visible in the brain. So
So
that
you
is
can
not applicable whatsoever.
okay.
We notice now that 100 hertz, and the thing here is that you have to divide the participants. Previously, in previous studies, you've done the entire group as one group. And then they say, well, there's nothing here. You have to divide the group into sensitive and unsensitive. Then you can see the effect of the sensitive individuals, and that is significantly. So this is why we did a migraine study. So we put the migrainers into a big, huge fMRI scanner, and we exposed them for flickering lights, and we could actually detect the migrainers. They even had a big, huge impact in the pain part. There's a pain center in the brain called the PAG, and that center was actually stimulated in the migrainers and not in the healthy subjects. So we do know now that the migrainers can actually, their response, brain response is a lot bigger than healthy controls for flicker. So we need to divide those groups.
Interesting. Thank you very much. And I give back to you for the moderation.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you, Marina. So Rudy Huang, your turn.
Okay, yes, let me share my screen. Okay. So can you see the presentation mode? Yes.
Yes, it's good.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, so hello everyone. I'm Rudy Huang from National Taiwan University. So in the webinar today, I'm going to talk about the symptom called divergence accommodation conflict. Especially we might experience nowadays while using a head-mounted display device, okay, such as VR goggles, AR goggles. And actually this could happen also with other type of stereoscopic display like the 3D TV, 3D movie and so. Okay, so we should first understand maybe what is divergence and what is accommodation. Of course, I know the first presenter already introduced us something about accommodation. Okay, so these are the two fundamental mechanisms in the human eyes and support our binocular visual tasks in our everyday life. Accommodation is the mechanism to focus the image for each eye for various viewing distances of the target at different locations. So please let me borrow the animation already used from our first presenter. So we could see that accommodation is the process when the eye changes its optical power by adjusting the crystal lens based on the distance of the object one is looking at. So when we look at the far point, for instance, then the refractive power is weaker and the inclination angle of the incoming light beam is smaller. On the opposite side, when we are reading something in a near distance, for instance, when you are reading a text message on your mobile device, okay, so a strong reflective power is required and the incoming light beam is then bended by a large inclination angle. Okay, so this is done by the accommodation mechanism by adjusting the curvature of the crystal lens. Okay. And then the other mechanism is called convergence. And this mechanism is to coordinate the two eyeballs to rotate simultaneously for getting one single image in our binocular vision. Okay, so you could see from, let's say, the left picture. Okay, so when we fixate on a distant object, okay, like here, if you are looking something from far, so the two eyes have outward rotation, okay, it's up to almost parallel to each other. And when we change the viewing point from a far distance to a near object like this, so the two eyeballs would rotate inwards simultaneously. Okay, so in order to get the right landing point on the retina for both eyes. Okay, so the convergence is to coordinate the rotation and the direction and angle of the two eyeballs. Okay, so so these two mechanisms, they are actually cross-linked with each other. Okay, as we may notice already that both of these mechanisms are depending highly on the viewing distance of the visual target. And as how can I go to the, yes, okay. So as we may see from Donda's slide here shown in the chart, he's trying to show the relationship between convergence and accommodation. So from Donda's slide, we can say the accommodation and convergence are about 1-to-1 proportional to each other. Okay, so that's the relationship between these two mechanisms. So they are communicating with each other somehow. Okay, and from this a little bit complicated diagram here, this is a control plot demonstrating the cross-link function, okay, of these two mechanisms. So here with this diagram, I would like to draw your attention to mention something in addition to the cross-link function here. So you could notice that, yes, so both of these mechanisms are not only affected by the physical properties of the environment, which is, for instance, the actual distance of the object you are looking at, but they are also affected by our cognition. So such as the perceived distance of the object. Okay, so this is important when we are talking about like some 3D display technology, because the perceived distance is not necessarily the same as the actual distance of the object. Okay, so we might need to consider what are the main players or what are the roles of these main players in this mechanism, both from the cognitive point of view as well as the physical properties. Okay, so now let's go to the point of the talk today. So how does our stereo vision, or let's call it also 3D vision, work in reality? Okay, so we could rely on the hint given by the disparity, which is the distance between the landing locations of the objects on the retina. Okay, so like from this example, if we have a green object in a far distance and then a pink, let's say, object in a near distance, so we can see both of these objects at the same time, of course. But depending on which one we are looking at, so this one we're fixating will be landing on the central of the retina, which is at the fovea, and the other one would then be in the periphery of the retina. Okay, so the relative disparity will give us an idea what's the distance or the difference of the distance, which one is more further away, which one is closer to the viewer. Okay, so we can rely on this disparity mechanism for the depth perception. And on the right-hand side, I also put the table showing that some common strategies we might use for depth perception. Okay, so that's just for you to take as a reference. Okay, so then why do we suffer, or let's say experience, the syndrome with certain 3D display? Okay, why is there the so-called vergence accommodation conflict? What is the actual conflict between these two mechanisms? Okay, so vergence accommodation conflict, the VAC, is the visual phenomenon that happens when the brain receives some mismatching cues between these two mechanisms. Okay, so let's say when we have the VR or AR goggles, okay, that's a typical case when we experience such problems. Okay, so the distance referenced by the accommodation mechanism, let's see from the right picture here. For the accommodation mechanisms, we use the distance from our eye to the screen to accommodate, okay, because that's all the images is shown on this screen. And this screen is at a fixed distance with most of the 3D devices. Meanwhile, depending on the virtual objects shown in the goggle in the display. So depending on the virtual distances of the virtual objects, the vergence mechanism is trying to coordinate the two eye rotations accordingly. Okay, so maybe we have a virtual duck in 3 meters away, and we have a virtual tree, let's say, in 5 meters away. Okay, so the vergence mechanism will try to coordinate the eye rotations depending on the 3 meters object or the 5 meters object accordingly. Meanwhile, we have distance for the accommodation mechanism. Okay, so these distances for these two mechanisms are not the same. Okay, and this would then cause the problems to the user of such devices. So we could imagine that, as Dr. Slide suggested before, we have kind of the hardwired relationship between the vergence and the accommodation mechanism, right? So now when we put on a head-mounted display, for instance, then you can consider this is a very strong dioptric power, this lens in front of us. So we would then shift the original relationship between the vergence and accommodation to a different new relationship. So we can adapt to this for sure, but then this requires some time. So within a short time when we have such devices, so the coordination of these two mechanisms would then feel that something new and something strange, and this causes some problems, or this makes up the stable or the used relationship between each other. Okay, so some short discussion here. So why do people experience due to the VAC? So some common symptoms are like the eye strain, blurred vision, or you see double image. And then of course we might have eye fatigue, or even headache, dizziness, or even nausea if it's a very strong reaction. So when we suffer from this, do we have any solutions for that? Yes, one easy suggestion from my side is to avoid such instrumental aided stereoscopic viewing. Okay, but then we would then not enjoy the technology, okay, anymore. So in addition to the not to use at all, we could also try some new type of stereoscopic display technology. For instance, like the light field display, the holographic display, multifocal displays, and so on. Okay, so because I know I don't have much time here for the webinar here today, so I would also provide you some further reference for your interest. So that's a recent publication from our research. So we are comparing some performance as well as the VAC's symptoms with a PC task versus a VR task, the VR goggle. And we compare this with two different age groups. So as Marina already said in the first talk, so with the elderly, they might suffer from the presbyopia. And from our study, we also give you some suggestions or some ideas. So maybe the VR devices or head-mounted devices could be a remedy for such people with or suffered by the presbyopia. But of course, they would then also get a stronger symptoms compared with the normal PC use case. Okay, but you can find some detailed information and suggestions from our recent publication here. Okay, so thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Rudy. And there's no questions in the Q&A, but there's actually one question in the chat function. Is the VAC affected by time of use of the HMD?
I mean, you mean which type? Wait,
that's a good question. Marino, you were the one that sent in the question. Do you think you can?
Chat. Okay, yeah. Is VAC affected by time of use? Yeah, that's a very good question from Marino. Yes, so yes, I would say, of course, this depends or affected by the time. But then it's also important to say which kind of HMD we are talking about. Okay, and then if that's let's say if that's a typical VR goggles, okay, and then if we have, I would say that's from my experience. So if you extend the time of use with the VR goggles, then the VAC is affected stronger or making stronger symptoms with such devices. Okay, but then if we are talking about other type of head-mounted display, that's maybe another story. Okay, but from my experience, VR goggles with the time, it's getting worse and worse. So I suggest don't use this more than 15 minutes in a row. Yes.
Excellent. Thank you, Rudy. And I also want to say that I'm one of those individuals that are struggling with watching 3D movies.
Me too.
Yes, because it's like I can do it for like 20 minutes and then I need to take like 5-minute rest and then I can do it for another 20 minutes and then I need to have 5 minutes rest. And I even tried on my son's Oculus. He was like, "Oh, let's go. You can go do this. We can do this together." And I was like, oh my goodness, I had to really take it off because it was so bad. Really, really. And I do have a exophobia at a near distance, and that really threw me off big time. So this is really, really important because
I
I
fully
can
understand.
See, yes, it
you
is.
You just don't appreciate gaming.
I appreciate two-dimensional gaming. Maybe not the 3D one.
Yeah, but not the 3D
My son
one.
was very disappointed at me. Okay. Thank you so much, Rudy. And then we'll go to the next presentation. Frank Pohung Lin.
Okay. Okay, is that clear?
Perfectly.
Okay. Currently is my part. Topic of my part is ergonomic evaluation in 3D display. And I'm Pohong Lim from Department of Industrial Engineering and Management, National Kaohsiung University of Science and Technology in Taiwan. Today, I will talk about a topic about applying signal detection theory and the RC curve in evaluating 3D baseball games. And I also have published this series of topics in Journal of Technology and in International Journal of Industrial Economics in 2019. So before I talk about this topic, I would like to share my motivation behind this study. I remember when I was young, I love to play baseball. And even in graduate school, I also play baseball with my classmates. So I'm thinking about that. If I can incorporate my hobby and also the academic research in ergonomics, that will be very interesting. So that is why I talk about this topic, applying the ergonomics theory in evaluating 3D baseball games. So let me introduce the signal detection theory. Here you can see, oh, sorry, I'm still sharing.
Yes, you are.
Okay, okay. Yeah, but I cannot see my, okay. So here is a signal detection theory. You can see there are two distribution. The right one is the distribution for signal, and the left one is distribution for noise. And the X is your judgment. So to the right of X, you consider it is the signal, and to left of X, you consider it is noise. Because noise and signal overlap with each other. So you can see there are four possibilities. Hit means false alarm and a correct rejection. For example, hit means your X is your judgment. You think the right of X you consider it is noise. And actually it is noise. You can see the white area. And for the false alarm, you consider it is signal, but you can see this is part of noise distribution. So that is false alarm. And when I play the baseball, I think the interaction between the pitcher and the batter also fits the four situation. For example, hit. Hit means when the pitcher, that computer gives the strike, and the batter receives this information and swing. Okay, that is hit. And the false alarm means that the pitcher give a ball, and the batter receive this information and swing. Okay. You can also see the past MLB game. A famous star, LA Dodgers, Shohei Ohtani. He has a famous split finger fastball. We also call the splitter. So when he throws in the beginning, it looked like the strike. But when approaching the home plate, it dropped rapidly and finally become a ball. So finally it is a ball, but in the beginning it like a strike. Okay, so the false alarm means the batter a swing. Okay, and also the correct rejections, because the red the red area you consider it is noise. So the pitcher gives a ball, the batter receives this information and did not swing. Oh, that is good. That is called correct rejection. For the miss, the pitcher gives a strike, and the batter receives this information but did not swing. Okay, miss the strike. Okay, so this situation is like the interaction between the pitcher and the batter. Okay, and so in this study, I investigate the different independent variables. The first one is display interface. So we have 2D. So you can see this is the famous game, 全民打棒球 in 2007. This is a 2D interface. And this is Nintendo 3DS. It is a handheld console, and you don't need to wear glasses, and you can see the auto stereoscope 3D. So I choose this console as the instrument here. And we also investigate the different factors like the ball speed and the operation time, 5, 10, and 15 minutes. And then we set up several dependent variables, including hit, miss, correct rejection and false alarm rate, just like I said before. And also I investigate the sensitivity, the deep run, and we measure the distance between these two distributions, and also the beta ratio. That is the ratio between the signal and the noise. And since we use because we show the 3D image, so we ask the participant to evaluate their performance. So we use SSQ simulator sickness questionnaire, which is proposed in 1993. Kennedy proposed that, and it also contain like nausea, oculomotor related symptom, and disorientation, and a total severity, okay, for this part of the questionnaire. And we also use the eye group presence questionnaire, which is found in Germany. So it also contains the general feeling, the presence, the involvement, and also the realness. Okay. So the result after we use the three-way ANOVA to analyze the data, and the result indicate that the 3D technique providing extra visual cue can have high hit rate, but also cause higher visual fatigue and IPQ. And about the time, long version time being associated with a better for performance for every variable except the SSQ. And we also draw the RC space, and you can see the all of the sample falling in upper and the left area. It means the participant had higher hit rate and lower false alarm rate. So the possibility of the participants' misjudgments were low. And the accuracy of this research is considered reliable. Okay. And then I also asked my student to conduct the extension. Yeah, so we investigate the new independent variables, like because the game, I think, not only not again not only for the young adult, for the middle-aged adult or senior citizen, they also love to play the video game. So we recruit different age group, and when you playing the game, maybe you will have different background music. So we set up non-light pop music and rock music to see if this will affect the performance. Okay, and also display interface 2D and auto stereoscopic 3D. From the result of ROC curve, you can see that the young adult perform better than the middle-aged adult, than the senior citizen. Okay, it is expected. And you can also see the background music was significant in most of the dependent variables. And we can from the post HOC test see that the rock music was different from the other three type of music. Okay, so this is my presentation. Just introduce to use the ergonomic theory in the 3D baseball game evaluation. And thank you for your attention. Okay.
Thank you, Frank. There are no questions in the chat function, and we're a little bit pressed for time, so I would suggest that we just move on. Thank you so much for a really interesting presentation. And the next presenter will be Sandra. You just need to unmute yourself as well, Sanyam.
Am I audible now?
Perfect.
Okay,
Thanks.
I hope my slide is visible now.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so today I'm going to talk about the importance of articulatory rehearsal mechanism in visual processing within the framework of driving research. So this is a work that I have done at Indian Institute of Technology, Indore. And what is important about visual processing within the framework of working memory is that whenever we are processing information, any information, I mean, all the information that we process through our sensory modalities. And irrespective of the sensory modalities, what I'm emphasizing here is that we need to rehearse the information, otherwise it will decay. So in case of driving scenario, what happens is that we are constantly navigating the visual field, which is dynamic because the vehicle is moving, the environment is constantly changing. In such a scenario, when driving is a very, very complex task involving perceptual motor coordination, visual processing is predominantly an important source of information to navigate the visual environment, apart from auditory, haptic, or other senses involved. So I'm emphasizing that visual information is very important. So what happens is that when we are trying to process information, since our working memory has limited capacity, and if we don't rehearse the information, it will decay. So in such a scenario, what I'm trying to emphasize is that when articulatory rehearsal mechanism is suppressed, you can think of it as some kind of auditory disruption or distraction. What happens is that our visual processing quality is compromised. And how do I try to prove that is the framework. So what I try to do is that I try to use eye tracking system, wearable eye tracking, and when drivers are driving, I give certain instructions here. So the kind of instruction here, so this is the kind of scenario, the test track. And with this framework of distracted driving, suppression of articulatory rehearsal mechanism, I just call it 3D SARM. In that, what is happening is that on the left side you see, and on the right side also, you see the twin signboards. So when there is a cross, you should not drive on that lane. So when you should follow the arrow sign, and if it is on the right side, you take the right and continue driving. If the arrow is on the left side, you take left and continue driving, and that's a scenario. So how do people process this information? Visual information was the actual test track based driving research that I did in order to understand what happens if we suppress the rehearsal mechanism. The mechanism I used was this. So this is a scenario how people would drive, and I divided into 3 groups. There is no suppression, that is the control group, and normal driving, and there is simple suppression of articulatory rehearsal mechanism, and I have complex suppression. So the way I did the suppression was I instructed the drivers that when you see the signboard, the moment you start saying, before you cross, and we put a kind of the distance marked, and the driver has to start counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like that. That's the suppression I'm doing while you are still driving. And for the complex suppression, I tell them that you count down, let's say 60, 59, 58, 57, like that. So compared to these 2 countings, what happens is that the countdown is more cognitively engaging, That's why it increases the suppression level. So when we compare the three levels of suppression, no suppression, simple suppression, and complex suppression, when we analyze, we are able to identify that there is a difference in terms of the gaze behavior. And in case of driving error, whether it slips or lapses, it gets increased. So you can see on the right side under complex suppression, slips is having the highest highest score, and lapses as well. So what are the things that I want to emphasize here is that, let's say many people said that, anyway, in various parts of the world, it's illegal to talk over the phone while driving. If you are holding phone and driving, that's illegal. People don't know what is the reason for that. Or is it the case that the kind of in-vehicle interfaces we have are distracting in terms of the suppression of articulatory rehearsal mechanism, which is so important in working memory to rehearse the incoming information to be meaningfully processed, whereby it is reducing the fixation duration and counts. And that could be an indicator for a marker for having accidents. So drivers paid more visits to the visual target and attempted to visit or visually process. However, they didn't get sufficient opportunity to devote attention for further meaningful visual processing. The depth of processing in terms of top-down processing connection was missing, so they were not able to execute the given task, visual task properly. So in that case, increase in suppression of ARM is serving as a kind of distraction. So that explains the mechanism why when drivers are auditorily distracted, our quality of visual processing is compromised. And in a dynamic environment like driving, when distraction is induced in such a way that it is suppressing the articulatory rehearsal mechanism in working memory, then it definitely leads to missing the visual cues. And also, not only the performance compromise, higher occurrence of lack of coordination between perceptual process and the motor output in terms of task execution happens. So that's the argument I'm making. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanram, for a really interesting presentation. And also, I would like to say something. We didn't get any questions in the Q&A, but I do have a note to actually say, because when I'm out driving myself, when I find myself, oh, I can't really find my way or something, I always turn off the radio.
Yes.
Because the noise is actually disturbing me, and that actually supports. Now I know why.
Now you can get the sensory focus.
Cognitive.
Yes. Yeah, you can get the sensory focus and reorient.
Yes. So now I know why I turn down the music levels when I'm looking to find my way somewhere.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And then I'd like to introduce our last speaker of today, Beatriz Rodendo Cabrera.
Okay, now you can hear me.
No, we can hear you. Excellent.
Okay. Okay. So thank you very much, Levi. I will start with the last presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. This is about okay. This presentation is about computer vision syndrome. I will first explain what this is. Okay. So computer vision syndrome is defined as a combination of eye and vision-related symptoms that are normally originated by prolonged use of digital devices. This could be computers, tablets, e-reading, or even smartphones. So the difference of the symptoms that are produced with these kind of devices are different between those that could be done with paperwork or with a book. because normally we have to look harder when we are looking with these devices, normally because they have some characteristic like glare or also smaller letters, and also they can have also a different brightness that makes our symptoms worsen than if we have a different kind of visual stimuli. So the symptoms could be organized in different categories. We have ocular internal symptoms, when we can have eye strain, age in our eyes, tired eyes, and sore eyes. Also, we have other kind of visual symptoms that are more related about how we can see, like blurred vision, double vision, also lowness of the focus change, difficult to change between far and near. Also, we have some ocular external symptoms that are related with dry eye. That could be burning, dryness, redness, also reading sensation, tearing. And finally, we have some other kind of symptoms that are not that related with the eye, but as shoulder pain, neck pain, and more with our whole body. So this is important to know why we are talking about today about computer vision syndrome, because now that we are using more often than ever this kind of devices, and we have more of these symptoms, and it's starting to be a public health concern. So here in this figure, we can see how much hours per day we use these kind of devices, depending on the country. So the countries that are using more these devices could be Indonesia and Philippines, that are mostly like 8 hours per day. And there are also others like have a slower time, like 6 hours per day. The last one, Italy. Also, it's important to see in this figure that there are different kind of devices. The one that we normally use the most are smartphones. So the prevalence of computer vision syndrome, even when we are using only 2 hours per day these devices, is about the 80% of population worldwide, and it's established that the global prevalence is about 60 million people with these kind of symptoms. And also it's important to notice that the incidence is increasing each year by 1 million. And different points are that the risk of having these symptoms can depend on different issues. For example, if we are using more than one device at the same time, these symptoms increase. And also, if we are using contact lenses, we can have a higher prevalence of this condition. So now I want to explain how can we detect if we have computer vision syndrome. So the main point is to ask about the related symptoms. We can do this with different questionnaires. For example, I put here the CVSQ questionnaire. Also, we have dry eye related questionnaire like the dry eye questionnaire DEQ5. And also we can ask it, just asking for specific symptoms that I explained before, and asking about predisposition factors. For example, we can ask how many hours per day we are using these devices, or we are using, for example, contact lenses that are also associated with this condition. Next point is important to evaluate our ocular health and our visual function, so we know how our visual system behaves in this kind of tasks. So we can ask and evaluate the visual acuity, refraction, pupil examination, and other kind of exams, including ocular health. And lastly, for analyze this condition, we have some objective markers that are normally viewed and evaluated with non-clinical procedures. For example, we can test accommodation and divergence, and also critical frequency, as it was explained before, like Levi, that is important to know how is our threshold, which is the frequency that our eye can detect this frequency that the displays produce. So for example, for accommodation and divergence, we could use a kind of devices for accommodation autorefractometers, Benger's eye trackers, also for pupil, that are not normally available in clinics, but some people in research, they use them just to have more accurate prescription and details of this syndrome. So now we are going to see which are the main causes. We are going to divide this into main areas, which are vision causes and ergonomics. So starting with vision, it's very important to do this exam and know if we have an uncorrected vision problems. For example, if we have a refractive error, it has been associated with a higher prevalence of this syndrome. It's even important to notice if we have small kind of astigmatism, because even 0.5 diopters has been associated with this syndrome. Also, accommodation is very important to evaluate, that it is being talking before, even if we have presbyopia. And there are some syndromes, like some disorders that optometrists normally study, like for example, accommodative infacility, where we don't have the ability to change fast from far to near, that are also related with this syndrome. Also some binocularity problems like convergence efficiency are related with it. I was explaining before that we also have dry eye related syndromes, so it's very important to test how our ocular surface is, and there are some risk for having these symptoms more high, which are reduced or incomplete blinking. Also have it a larger papillary fissure, because when we are looking at a computer or a smartphone, we are normally looking up and not down, like if we are doing in a paper. So we have a bigger exposure of our ocular surface that gets drier faster. It's important also to test the humidity and the dust. And also there are some conditions like gender. Women we are more likely to have dry eye, age, or some kind of medication that could worsen this. And as I was mentioning before, contact lens use also dries our eye. And now in the other main point, which are ergonomics, there are many issues that could worsen our symptoms. First, it will be the suboptimal quality of digital device. For example, if we have a lower resolution on the screen with less pixels, our symptom will worsen. Also, we have a poor image stability, poor readability or legibility. For example, if we use capital letters or if we use low contrast, it will worsen. And also we have low refresh rates of our screen. This was also explained before by Hillary. So all the computers normally have like a refresh rate of about 60 more or less, and newest have it faster. So it will be better to use newest devices because this refresh rate is better. Another point is the lighting condition, also mentioned before. I will be fast here. It's very important to have a good surrounding light, avoid like windows close to us, to avoid that glare, also reflections. And a different point is the blue light, because it has been said that this kind of devices emit blue light. And it has been a lot of controversy about this, because at the beginning, it was said that this could worsen and damage our retina and also increase the visual fatigue. But now there's a lot of evidence that contradict these first theories, and they say that they are not damaging our retina, not increasing our visual fatigue. But it looks like now there are evidence that say that this could worsen our sleep pattern because they alter our circadian rhythm. So this is like tendency with blue light right now. Okay, so now that we have said which are the main causes, let's see how to prevent it, which is the most important thing about this talk. I don't have a lot of time, so I will try to be very fast, and I will divide into main areas that are the ocular factors and environmental factors. And I here share with you a recent study that is a systematic review meta-analysis that is including 45 different studies analyzing how to improve these symptoms. And they conclude that it's needed further research to know which is the best way to solve this problem. So I will just explain a bit where are we right now, and I recommend you to have a look to this paper. So first, what we have to do is correct our refractive error if we have some. So even small astigmatism, small myopia or hypermetropia is important to correct it. Also very important presbyopia, as it was explained by Marino at the beginning. We need wide corridors with a better vision in the medium distance. Also, we need to ask, very important, which is the distance that this person is working with this device to have a good prescription for them, and choose which kind of lenses we are using. So here at the right, we have a study of Sanchez-Bro recent, where they were evaluating how the symptoms of computer vision syndrome were if we are using progressive additive lenses or occupational lenses. These occupational lenses, what they have is an area for intermediate vision and for near vision. And what they saw is that with these last lenses, the symptoms are less than with the typical progressive additional lenses. So they recommend to, in case we have risk of computer vision syndrome, to use occupational lenses. Also, a different thing is important is to use, if we can, spectacles instead of contact lenses because they increase the dry eye related symptoms. And there is no evidence about using blue light filter on our spectacles because it's not related with visual fatigue. Related with other factors like accommodative and divergent disorders, this has been explained before by Rudy. And there are different ways to improve our visual system if we have any disorder, like I was telling before, accommodating facilities. So there's visual therapy, there are also sound lenses or frames that could help this kind of symptoms. And also when we are using a digital device, we are normally using a very close distance and working for a really long period. So this normally also worsens our accommodative and binocular system. So there are some points that are very popular and recommended to avoid this prolonged and worse accommodative system, which are keep the devices as far as possible, as far as we can, and also to take regular breaks. Maybe all of you know the 20-20-20 rule, with what it's saying is that every 20 minutes, we have to look 20 feet away, which are 6 meters, for 20 seconds. So this is for taking regular breaks and remember this rule during our work. But it's not clear why these specific numbers are chosen. And now me and my research team were analyzing which is the best break schedule. And we have this study is not published yet, but what we have seen is that taking like self-paced breaks instead of a specific rule for everybody is better to avoid this kind of symptoms. Regarding dry eye symptoms, just making it fast, it's important to don't forget to blink because when we are paying attention to a task, we normally blink less. So there are some blinking training, like the one that is in this image of the study of Kim. Also, we can improve the ergonomics using a humidifier, drinking more water, changing the direction of the heating and air condition, using lubricating drops. And in case that we have a dry eye disease, we will need a treatment that should be done by the doctor. And for finishing, the environmental factor that we should take into account when working with these digital devices are to have a correct position of our laptop. For example, it's recommended to have 10 or 15 degrees below our horizontal line of sight, have it as far as possible to avoid this fatigue, have our body relaxed, back supported, head and neck also, it had to be aligned, and have wrist on the hands aligned with the forearms. Also, the light is very important, as it was being telling before by Hillary. So we need to avoid the contrast of the lighting. We need to have to reduce the glare, to have the similar light conditions from the computer, from the surroundings, and also to adjust the screen contrast until we find it comfortable. So just to conclude, I want to highlight that this syndrome is very important right now because we are increasing the number of hours that we are spending different digital devices, and it's increasing a lot our symptomatology, making it really harmful for a lot of people. So knowing which is the main cause for each person and knowing which are the recommendations, we can try to implement these strategies and avoid the prevalence and the impact of this syndrome. So thank you very much, and I just finished.
Thank you so much, Beatrice, for an interesting presentation. And I know that we don't have any Q&A questions, but Marino and I have a question each. So please, Marino, go ahead.
I was wondering, how do you rate the self-responsibility of installing good ergonomic environments? I mean, do we need to teach people how to do this or to remind them from time to time, or is it going automatically?
To what the first part of the question I didn't hear, sorry?
How in your opinion,
Yes.
how do you rate the self-responsibility of the users in installing good ergonomic conditions?
Yeah, That's a problem. For example, there are many studies that have been following people with a specific recommendations, and the number of people that follow for a specific time is low. So you are not in a study and you are doing it because you want, maybe not everybody is doing it. But if you feel like a difference, if you are improving your symptoms, that will be the best way for a person to see that that is improving. But by the moment, I think that's just sharing it with people also, because now kids and also teenagers are using these devices more often, and also workers. It's very important to include it like in the ergonomics recommendations, so it's available for everybody, and also for teachers at the schools. It will be important to tell everybody, and then we cannot follow because it depends if you are interested, if you suffer those symptoms or not.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I also had a question regarding the blue blocking filters that you were talking about. You didn't see an effect, and I haven't seen any other studies that says claims any difference either. But I was just thinking, because I accidentally got blue blocking filters on my glasses, my room progressive glasses that I have. And I've been really light sensitive previously, and since I started using those, I'm not anymore. So therefore, just an idea, again, we divided the flicker sensitive into two groups. I think that there might actually be something here if you divide the group into the sensitive individuals and not sensitive individuals. Then you might actually come to some other conclusions. I think that that's something that we notice that somehow, but I don't know what measurements, and that's also something for us to think about. What type of measurements should we do to actually find those individuals that are more sensitive? Marino?
Yeah, there is a type of measurement. I can send you the literature. It's very academic, but they are recording subjectively how people feel sensitive in different glare situations in a standard setting. So with
Exactly.
different brightness patterns and so on.
Yeah, thank you. There's also the pattern glare test, and there are other things as well. But I mean, if you're an optometrist and you want to find out if your patient is actually sensitive or not, you need to find some sort of easy way test. How can we do that? And I think that that's something that might actually be missing, because then we can give completely different recommendations as optometrists. And I think that might be something. I'm really looking forward to other data here as well and looking into this. And Philip, there was someone that wanted you to share the title of the paper you just mentioned. If you could do that in the webinar chat, that would be, if that's possible, Marino.
In a short time, I cannot, but I can put it. I don't know whether there is some on the cloud. There is some place to store this, or Philip, you can send me your mail and I send you the literature.
Yeah, that might be easier for us to do. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. We've run out of time. We're 3 minutes afterwards. But thank you so much for all of your presentations. It's been really interesting. And I hope I see you guys soon for our next meeting in our technical committee. And thank you so much and have a great day.